Good Yontif. Let me invite, before we begin, if you have devices that keep you tethered to the outside world, this would be a wonderful time to turn them off, power them down, set them in airplane mode, whatever it is you need to do. If you're a first responder and you have to keep it on, set it to silent or vibrate. Just a reminder, this side of our sanctuary has been set aside for those with youngsters 11 and under who are masked but still unvaccinated. Our center row is intended for all of us who'd like to be close to one another. There's no amount of separation, except the spiritual, I suppose. And this side of our sanctuary, we are trying so that I don't know how well we're doing it, that every other row is kept empty and people have that 6-foot magic bubble around themselves for their family unit so that we're not right on top of one another. Please do follow the directions of the ushers. Suffice to say, we are so incredibly grateful to Plymouth Church to be able to be here, but we are also obliged by many regulations, unusually at this season, the CDC, the New York State Health Department, and down to our own reopening task force and our own medical experts, as well, of course, as the policies of Plymouth Church itself. So we are particularly grateful to our greeters, our ushering crew, for helping remind us of all those things tonight. As far as masks go, I'll just remind you, right, nose, mouth, and chin. Someone will write a song about that at some point. It is warm here in the sanctuary at Plymouth. If you are fasting and you're starting to feel a little bit not all there, if you want to grab a drink of water in the back, no one's making judgment, okay? This is an extraordinary circumstance in an extraordinary year, and the function of fasting is to raise our spirits up above our bodily needs. But if your bodily needs are preventing you from doing that, please be attentive, especially if you're on medications or your doctor has told you you should not be fasting, then you should not be fasting. Fasting is but a component. There's always next year. I'm also supposed to remind you that the guidelines are to hum softly, read along, but not sing aloud. You're adults, you'll make choices. We are very lucky that our choir, the cantor, and myself, in addition to masks, and the choir has special masks that have been purchased at a significant expense for singers, that all of us have also spent our time going to City MD or elsewhere for our second PCR exam so that we can stand up here and tell you that we know that we are, as best as the medical community can tell you, safe as we are speaking aloud and singing aloud. So I encourage you to be participant in a manner that works for you and is courteous to those around you, but also allows you to feel that you are a participant and not merely an observer on this Kol Nidre Eve. Let me invite you to turn to page 14 in the silver Yom Kippur Machzor, the holiday prayer book. And I want to invite you to read responsively as we open the ark and rise. Please rise, everyone. Yom Kippur, the Jewish people's festival of the soul, and Kol Nidre, its sacred portal. A night of deep emotions, a night, as the psalmist wrote, to rejoice with trembling.
We rejoice at the sound of Kol Nidre, rhythmic words of release from vows, oaths, and promises to God we fail to keep.
We tremble at the melody, music of spiritual amazement. It fills us with awe as we stand before God and Torah.
We rejoice that we stand together, strengthened by community in this hour of shared weakness and humility.
We tremble, for tonight we confess our flaws, admit our imperfection, and acknowledge the power far beyond our understanding
We rejoice that we commit ourselves to great endeavors because we feel so deeply and think so nobly.
We tremble, for we find that our ideals are far greater than our ability. Our promises surpass our might.
We rejoice in the freedom that is called Nidre's true gift, the freedom to begin a new year without fear of failure, to aspire to be God's image in the world.
We tremble because we are mortal. We rejoice in our gratitude for life.
We rejoice with trembling and enter Kol Nidre to face our humanity.
Let me invite you once again to have a seat. By the way, I say this so regularly, I'm sure you could all quote me, but there's a lot of please rise and be seated in Jewish worship. And if you find yourself in one position or another, and that's comfortable and it works for you, please feel free to stay, whether it's seated or standing. If that's the best position, please don't worry. These are customs for those for whom it allows a spiritual uplift. Please feel free to join with us. And especially for those who are joining on the Zoom or the live stream, just a reminder that the occasional invitations to rise are invitations to rise in body and or in spirit, recognizing that all of us have different capacities and capabilities. And especially if you're at home, I say this a little bit to produce a chuckle, but not all together. You don't have to wear your mask. So if you want to be in solidarity with us, that's great. Take a picture, let us know, but it's not obligatory. I want to invite you to turn to page 9. Page 9 for the kindling of Yom Tov lights. The human spirit is the lamp of God, searching out what lies within us. Guided by the flame of conscience on this sacred night, we search for truth. Together, shine your light upon us as we strive to serve you. May we find safety in your faithful love. We light the flame of healing and forgiveness on this atonement night. We give thanks for love. Turn ahead to page 16. It is customary for us to call upon past presidents, which I am unable to invite up to the bima, but I want to invite our past presidents to rise in place first before the rest of the congregation so that we might acknowledge the presence of our past presidents. Barbara, thank you. Susan, thank you. Harry, thank you. Anne, thank you. David, thank you. Thank you all for your continuing service to our community and for your dedication. I invite the congregation to follow your example at this time, and please rise.
Oh
Melissa, did I miss you? She's outside. She's standing outside. Wow. Checking everyone's passes. Okay. Thank you. With one voice, on page 16. With one voice, assembled sages, past and present, declare, all may pray as one on this night of repentance. Let none be excluded from our community of prayer. Together, with one voice, God and congregation proclaim, all may pray as one on this day of return. Let all find a place in this sacred assembly. Page 18, the melody and then words of Kol Nidre. oaths and commitments, vows of abstinence and terms of obligation, sworn promises and oaths of dedication that we promise and swear to God and take upon ourselves from this day of atonement until the next day of atonement, may it find us well. We regret them, and for all of them we repent. Let all of them be discarded and forgiven, abolished and undone. They are not valid, they are not binding. Our vows shall not be vows, our resolves shall not be resolves, and our oaths they shall not be oaths. All shall be forgiven, the entire community of Israel and the stranger who lives in their midst, for all have gone astray in error. Moses prayed to God, as you have been faithful to this people ever since Egypt, please forgive their failings now in keeping with your boundless love. And God responded, I forgive as you have asked. Proper, page 22, the Baruch Hu. Everyone. A reminder that you can follow if you are at home and watching on the live stream or the Zoom. The flip book has a link on the website so that you can follow the very same page that we are seeing in the hard print Machzor in front of us at Plymouth. We join together on page 24. Blessed are you, Adonai. Your great name fills the universe with majestic might. Your word creates twilight and dusk as your wisdom opens the gates of night. Your discernment separates the changing season and causes the passage of time. The stars arrayed across the sky reveal your design. You roll out the cycle of darkness and light, shaping day and night. You sweep away day and carry the world into nightfall, setting day apart from nighttime. You are God of all we can perceive and all that is beyond our perception. Living, eternal God, be our sovereign to the end of time. Blessed are you, Adonai, creator of twilight and dusk. Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. Page 26 rather. Page 26, together. Love beyond all space and time. Your love enfolds your people Israel. We receive it in your teaching, your gift of Torah, sacred obligations, discipline, and law. So let us speak these teachings when we lie down and rise up and find joy forever in your Torah and mitzvot. They are the very essence of our life, ours to ponder and study all our days. May we never lose or be unworthy of your love. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael, for you are blessed, the one who loves your people, Israel.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod, Shem Kevod.
join with the chanting of Ve'ahavta.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וכשאתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Page 41. We read responsively in the paragraphs, for every exile who walked out of Egypt between walls of water, for everyone who remembered the feel of sea bottom underfoot, the sibilant roar of water rearing on the right, on the left, someone forgot, someone scanning the dry horizon for a well, or already mourning the musky smell of autumn in her father's fig trees, forgot the hosannas and by the bitter waves of Mara, forgot the flash of dancing feet, the shimmer of timbrels. For every proselyte at Sinai, someone never heard of horns at all. Someone turned back from the mountain to bank the fire, feed the baby, steal a secret moment with another. Revelation begins in attention. While the elders trembled before the word of God flowing down the scorched north flank of Sinai, someone, rising from a last long embrace, gazed into the rapt face of the beloved and saw that it was good. We join together in the singing of Mi Chamocha. Page 42, Hashkivim. We join together. Bless our sleep with peace, Adonai, and awaken us to life when we rise. With power sublime, spread over us your shelter of shalom, and through your wisdom restore us, make us whole. Let your name proclaim your presence in our lives. Be our shield. Make us stronger than the enemies we face, illness and war, famine and sorrow, and stronger than the enemies in our hearts, wickedness and sin. Carry us to safety as on wings, for you are the monarch of grace, the sovereign of compassion. You are the one who cares for us and sets us free. Watch over us, we who go forth to life. Watch over us that we may come home in peace, now and till the end of time. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. Together at the bottom, Blessed One, you spread over us a canopy of peace, a shelter of shalom over all Israel, your people, and over Jerusalem. Page 45 at the top, we join together in the English. For on this day atonement shall be made for you, to purify you from all your wrongs, and pure you shall be in the presence of Adonai. We continue on page 46. As we rise once again in body and or spirit for the tefillah, the standing prayers.
Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'koneh HaKol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה זוכרנו לחיים מלך חפץ בחיים וכתבנו בספר החיים למענך
למענך
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, מוריד התן. מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, שונא נובלים ברוב החולים ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עופר, מי כמוך בעל גבורת ומידות החיות הכל, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל.
Page 53.
אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום יחללוך הסלע.
And so in your holiness give all creation the gift of awe. Turn our fear to reverence and let us be witnesses of wonder. Perceiving all nature as a prayer come alive, we bow to the sovereignty of your strength, the primacy of your power. We yearn for connection with all that lives, doing your will with a wholeness of heart. Awe-inspiring is your creation, all-encompassing your transcendent name. Page 54. Uvechein tein kavod Adonai le'amecha, and so in your holiness give your people the gift of honor. Bless with praise those who praise you. Bless with hope those who seek you. Give your believers a basis for faith, true happiness for the land of Israel, true joy in your city, Jerusalem. And may the sparks of David, your servant, soon grow bright enough for us all to see a beam of light in the darkness, a promise of perfection. Page 56, Uvechein sadikim yeruva yismachu. And so in your holiness, give the righteous the gift of a vision bright with joy. A world where evil has no voice and the rule of malevolence fades like wisps of smoke. Good people everywhere will celebrate the stunning sight of arrogance gone from the earth. Page 58, you and you alone, Adonai, will reign over creation. Upon Mount Zion, home of your presence, and in Jerusalem, a city set apart by you. As the psalmist affirmed, God will reign eternally, your God, Zion, for all generations. Hallelujah. You are holy, your name is awesome. There is nothing divine beyond you. As the prophet Isaiah taught, the source of all might is exalted through justice, the God of holiness made holy through righteousness. Blessed are you, Adonai, our holy sovereign. We continue silently through the remainder of Tefillah individually, at our own pace and in our own style through page 78.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon b'chol hashalom v'tov b'einecha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'kol letuvah sha'a b'shlomecha. בספר חיים ברכה ושלום, ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה, ברכה ושלום נזכר ונתכתב לפניך, אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים ולשלום. ברוך אתה אדוני עושה השלום.
You'll find the text of Osei Shalom on page, is it Osei Shalom? Sorry, the text of Yehiyu L'Ratzon, same page, page 81.
Adonai Tzuri, Adonai Tzuri, Adonai Tzuri,
Good Yontif. Okay. I want to acknowledge before I share my words tonight that as I do on occasion, this Yom Kippur, I wish to touch upon a difficult topic, one that is a mature topic, sexual harassment. It is intended for all of us I leave it for those with younger family members. There's nothing graphic about it, but it certainly discusses a failing within our American and Jewish community, and so I want to share that before I begin. Almost a decade ago, then Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel called the increasing cases and reportage of sexual assault in the U.S. military a scourge. Offering the commencement address at the United States Military Academy at West Point, he urged the Army's newest officers to help build, quote, a culture of respect and dignity in the United States Armed Forces. Sexual harassment and sexual assault in our military, he said, are a profound betrayal of sacred oaths and sacred trusts. I invoke Secretary Hagel's words tonight to remind us that sexual harassment and sexual assault are related, connected behaviors on a spectrum. To borrow his words, both in any setting, not just in the military, both harassment and assault are a profound betrayal of sacred oaths and sacred trusts, not merely military ones. Back in January of 2020, which feels like a decade ago, I began reading a series of articles and later books that argue that the building blocks of adult male sexual harassment are laid far earlier in life than we realize or generally acknowledge. As the father of 2 sons and 1 daughter, the seeds of my fear of my own complicit guilt were planted as I read further. Now, of course, sexual harassment isn't a uniquely Jewish or American phenomena. It's a worldwide human phenomena. But on this holy day of Yom Kippur, when we practice Heshbon Nefesh, the inventory of our souls, it is important to acknowledge the facts as concern our own society and our own nation. Nationwide, 81% of women reported experiencing some form of sexual harassment and or assault in their lifetime. That means almost all of your wives and daughters and mothers and sisters. Almost 1 in 4 undergraduate women have experienced sexual assault or misconduct at the 33 major universities in this nation, even if they haven't told you. And yes, men also experience sexual harassment, though not in the same percentages. And as will surprise almost no one, as in the case of women, the perpetrators are statistically almost always men. So tonight, I would focus on the issue of men. Men specifically as sexual harassers, as the sin of our season. You might be surprised to find out that it's not only a modern topic, but also very much a biblical and rabbinic topic of discussion. Scripture recognizes, however imperfectly, that men regularly, perhaps I dare say normatively in the biblical setting, act as harassers of women. But one glaring example that you probably know, King David's personal life reads like a grand jury indictment, not only in regards to his objectification of many girls, women, and wives in his life, but in the adultery committed with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband to hide his crime. Yet, Scripture's constant holding up of David as God's David, Yedid, beloved, who has earned his own personal covenant of kingship, only unfortunately serves to reinforce an ancient stereotype, A, that powerful men who are political leaders are prone to sexual assault, if not worse, and are regularly granted pardon and forgiven for their talents. Rabbinic tradition recognizes and to some degree normalizes the same behavior in men in general and male leaders in particular. Quote, it was taught in a Baraita that Rav Eli said, if a person sees that his Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination, that's the sexual inclination, is becoming too powerful, let him go to a place where people don't know him, do not recognize him. Let him dress in black, wrap himself up, do what his heart desires, and thereby at least not desecrate God's name in public. Oy. But in the rabbinic period, there's also a turning point, thank God, one that views illicit or immoral sexual behavior as actually needing to be restrained. Ilan Gilad writes, the rabbis had a complicated and, like most human beings, somewhat contradictory view of sex. They simultaneously believed that sex was a good thing, that it should be pursued with passion, and yet that it stemmed from base urges that needed to be restrained. While the rabbis seemed to see the act itself of sex as legitimate, natural, even obligatory, livriut, they take a very different approach when it comes to the male sexual urge, the Yetzer Hara, and when discussing it in rabbinic literature. The Yetzer Hara, for those not familiar with it, the evil inclination, is conceived by the rabbis as a sort of demonic twin to our better self. You know, the good angel and the devil, right? That occupies the male body and causes us to sin. Very little discussion about Yetzer Hara in women. Quite a few passages in the Talmud, in fact, recount the individual struggle of rabbis with their sexual urges. Maybe I'll offer that as a reading course if anyone's interested. Nevertheless, the rabbis felt that ultimately that urge, the Yetzer Hara, was a necessary evil. In Yoma 69b, that's the tractate dealing with this day, Yom Kippur, we find the curious story about a time when the rabbinic sages 2,000 years ago claimed to have managed to catch and lock away the Yetzer Hara in a cave. But it turned out that without the Yetzer Hara, without that evil inclination, that id-like impulse to acquire and assert, to win and procreate, the world basically ground to a halt. No one would get out of bed in the morning. No one attended to chores or work. There was no sex. Children weren't conceived or born. Art was no longer created. Bridges were no longer designed nor built. So eventually the sages realized they had to let the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, back out in the world. I am neither complimenting nor condemning these traditions. I am simply pointing out the existence of at least 3 millennia of predominantly male-authored struggle to acknowledge men's urges and behaviors. And it is worth admitting, for all their many imperfections, that the biblical and rabbinic traditions do make significant, if highly imperfect, efforts to protect women from sexual abuse and assault. Not enough. To be clear, the underlying sensibility nevertheless remains in the Bible and in rabbinic lit. Boys will be boys and men will be men. We can legislate, we can punish, but there's little else we can do. Today, observant ultra-Orthodox Jewish men are expected to avoid physical contact and even physical proximity to unrelated women, avoiding even eye contact. Women are directed to cut their hair, avoid singing aloud, all with the hope that by such avoidance by the men and constraint of the women, that we will diminish, apparently, men's lack of self-control. Well, we know how well that plays out in the real world. We here in our community need a better approach. Ironically, perhaps the most famous rabbinic story about sex itself, certainly my favorite, found in the tractate Benedictions, Brachot, in the Babylonian Talmud, recounts the story of Rav Kahana, a 3rd century sage who snuck under his mentor's bed in order to observe his mentor having sex with his mentor's wife. Of course, Kahana was discovered in the story. He was roundly rebuked and ordered to leave at once. But you know what Kahana declared? He defended his actions, saying that it, remember sex, it is Torah, and I have to learn it. Brachot 62a, if you want to look it up. But today in our Jewish community, and certainly in our nation as a whole, learning and discussing sex and desire and attraction are all but absent elements of boys' and men's cultural conversation other than locker room talk. Most boys receive little, if no, guidance on how to deal with feelings and drives that develop in adolescence. By the time most boys have graduated high school, their vast majority of time and influence they've experienced regarding the topic has been what, instructor? Pornographic videos. In all deference to Dr. Ruth, what is absent in our culture is less a discussion of sexual satisfaction or expertise in the physics of intimacy, and far more the need and ability for young men to acknowledge and understand their own biology and their own drives, to learn to control and constrain and positively envision and direct them. We have, that's me too, me. I have neglected, if not ignored our sons' emotional and physical development. Sex education in our country is relegated to perhaps one course in junior high school, and that course is primarily focused on mechanics and avoiding pregnancy. As pediatrician Dr. Kara Natterson tells us in her book, Decoding Boys, puberty today in boys begins years prior to us seeing any physiological external signs. We have a generation of boys who are maturing physically earlier but emotionally later than we previously realized. And in Peggy Ornstein's book, Boys and Sex, we learn that while most boys she's interviewed seem to want intimacy over dissociated sex, no one has ever discussed with them how they might go about building intimate relationships. Instead, their major and often only exposure to sexuality is once again pornography. Quote, pervasive beyond adult recognition and so ingrained in the music our kids listen to, extreme in its fetishization and dehumanizing of women, that many older adolescent boys and young men are clinically desensitized to live consensual partnered sex. And have you noticed that even general non-X-rated media bombards all of us, but especially preteens and teens, with narratives that seem to imply that men need and are entitled to sex? The apparent goal of high school and college boys, according to the research done by Ornstein, is a dissociated, emotionally unintimate sexual encounter that we know as hookup culture. Or as one boy inquires in her book, can you have sex without feelings? Or hot sex with a cold heart? This goal encourages and explains why alcohol so often accompanies teenage and young adult sexual encounters for boys and men, which research shows are often fueled by alcohol, which dulls anxiety, awkwardness, and of course, judgment, and too often is a precedent to coercion. This is the milieu of at least the majority of American boys, a desire to hit it and quit it, a pervasive culture that urges boys to disrespect and to engage detachment in their intimate encounters. Incessant messages that sexual conquest remains the measure of real men. Few boys have had conversations about sex and intimacy with a thoughtful adult mentor, certainly not with parents, most of whom Ornstein writes in her book. I had to use this quote. I was going to kill it, but this is what she writes. Most parents would rather poke themselves in the eye with a fork than speak frankly to their sons about sex. It's excruciating, and it's not like our own parents offered us a template. But our silence in this matter, as in others, can indeed be a chet, a sin. A 2017 survey of 3,000 high school students and young adults found that a large majority of boys had never had a single conversation with their parents about sexual consent with a partner or what it means to be a caring and respectful sexual partner. 2/3 had never heard a parent counsel them against having sex with an intoxicated partner or while they were intoxicated. And most had never heard from either parent that they should not refer to women by degrading names, catcalls, or wolf whistles. And yet in the same survey, 90% of girls reported having been sexually harassed. As a society, we are whistling in the dark, hoping to somehow convey sexual knowledge and values via osmosis. As Orenstein says, adults may assume these ideas are self-evident, that they are beyond the need for conversation, but given the rates of coercion, misconduct, and assault among men, both young and old, boys are clearly not getting the message. As Orenstein noted in her previous research, Girls and Sex, most girls she interviewed considered their early sexual experiences with boys something to get over rather than to treasure. If, as a society, we wish to change this outcome, then men, starting as boys, young boys, need to be counseled and directed first that in relationship we do no harm. Harm too often caused by the desire for young men to dominate, or by male privilege, that sense of entitlement, or sometimes heedlessness, or even plain stupid ignorance. To do so, we need to expand our very limited, if non-existent, conversations with our kids about sex and intimacy, moving from simple mechanics, pregnancy, and asserting no, to an ongoing dialogue about what we want for our boys and girls to say yes to. What is our vision of a healthy, fulfilling, sexually intimate encounter and relationship? Can we risk having that conversation? We need to be willing to have these conversations with our sons, especially, about healthy sex and intimacy being built around seeing another full person, valuing mutual gratification and reciprocal pleasure, both physical and emotional. My colleague, Rabbi Mary Zamor, has written this powerful addition to the Vidui Rabbah, the long confession, which is our next piece of liturgy tonight. I believe it deserves to be a permanent part of our liturgy. She writes, as we enter the High Holy Days, we reflect on our individual failings, but our liturgy also instructs us to confess communally, recognizing the role each person has in shaping their community. In that spirit, Mary writes, I offer this addition to our prayers of repentance to allow us to reflect on the plague of misogyny, which continues to shape women's experience of the world. Gender harassment has many expressions, including sexual assault, sexual harassment, microaggression, wage inequity, and the unequal representation of women in leadership positions throughout all corners of our society. While this confession, which we'll hear, emphasizes sexual harassment, true equality will not come until we address all expressions of gender harassment. Confessing our communal wrongs is only one step, a first step in the tikkun, the repair needed, but it is an important first step. She's labeled these a Me Too, Gam Ani confession. And if you feel like it, you can join me. Al chet shechatanu, for the sin we have committed before you, by not believing the victims, by being silent while women were bullied, harassed, or undermined, by claiming to be ready to listen when we were not, by claiming equality exists for all, by not supporting victims, by not providing sexual harassment prevention training, by accepting the sexist comments made every day, by blaming the victims, by claiming our workplaces, synagogues, and organizations are safe, by contributing to an environment that allowed harassment, by explaining away harassment, by believing the victims but not acting to make change, by worrying about our community's reputation instead of the victim's needs, by not reflecting on the past and present behavior within our community, by denying that gender harassment has many faces, by allowing victims to suffer retribution, by not noticing when women simply walked away from our community or institution, by making the report of harassment difficult and hard to engage, by promising change and not fulfilling this promise. Al chet shechatanu, for the sins we have committed before you, O God, we ask forgiveness. And lastly, we should ask, is there any reason to be hopeful? I think so, and I believe so. I think things have changed for the better, at least some, since Chuck Hagel's commencement address back in 2013. To begin with, the Me Too movement isn't only a movement of feminists or of women. It is a movement of caring human beings, gender-identified and not. But especially tonight, I want to point out those of us, cisgendered men like myself, men who do not want to be complicit and silent bystanders, men who want to improve the experiences of their daughters and their sons, their wives and their sisters. I struggled how to end tonight's sermon, and then on September 5th, a striking op-ed piece in the paper came like a miracle just before Rosh Hashanah, and it encouraged me. It's written by Maya Guzdar, a senior at Stanford University. She was a summer intern at the DoD, the Department of Defense. That's where Chuck Hagel had been the secretary. She attended an office happy hour party in July. Guess what happened? She was publicly approached and harassed by a drunken older senior employee. And after a lengthy period of verbal harassment and far too close leaning in, physical proximity, this man eventually careened toward Ms. Guzdar in an alarming manner. Well, that's when someone intervened. A male officer noticed, actively pushed him away from her, and a female colleague immediately scooped her up with the rest of the interns and drove them home. What was different was that the very next day when Ms. Guzdar arrived at the office, the reality that awaited her was one she had never imagined, the best case scenario. The man who had intervened on her behalf, a senior military official, had reported the incident, and others who had been present corroborated his statement. Ms. Guzdar's harasser quit soon after the investigation into his actions began. She writes, quote, "Most astonishing, I felt supported, safe, and validated throughout the experience. My fellow interns and I were interviewed and given opportunity to speak individually to a female supervisor about the incident. In her estimation, here is what set this episode apart. First, a male officer reported what happened. His seniority, gender, and military status probably helped convince the rest of the office of the seriousness of the incident. Second, the public nature of the incident made it difficult for anyone to deny her experience, as so many men in power have done when that happens behind closed doors." She writes, quote, "Those crucial differences and my coworkers' empathy helped me to be rehumanized. The officer who reported the incident believed that a wrong had been done, and that validated me. I finally allowed myself to feel the horror, disgust, and compassion for myself that I'd been suppressing. And in the following days, nearly every woman in the office checked in on me. Most poignant, an email in my inbox the next morning from a military officer's wife, asking to share her experiences with me as a woman in national security. One of our office's leaders took personal responsibility in a conversation with me in which he pledged to institute bystander training. He also ensured that the consequences for this harassment were visible to others, calling a meeting with senior staff members to discuss the issue aloud. And he showed compassion for the harasser too. My boss offered him counseling, a humane response that to me felt appropriate and even cathartic. A month later, in August, Ms. Gustar reports that she finally worked up the courage to acknowledge and thank the officer who intervened and report on her behalf. Quote, "He deflected anything close to a thank you," she writes. He said, "It's about protecting each other," and he added, "It is an honor and privilege to serve with you." That is what we need to be discussing out loud, not once a year. It's what we need to be teaching our boys and our men every day. It is an honor and a privilege, but it is also an obligation and a precept. We men cannot be bystanders. We must become upstanders. Our boys and we need to be taught to speak out, to intervene, to interrupt as active allies and advocates who intrude whenever and wherever that sacred trust would be betrayed. If only we can do that. Ken Yehi Ratzon, good Yontif, and a meaningful fast. As always, I welcome your responses and your feedback. After the holiday is concluded, please, I'll try to respond as I am able, but I appreciate the privilege of sharing from this pulpit. We are at page 82, and we are at that vidui. As we turn to 82, I'll invite us to rise before the open ark. Together, our God and God of all generations, may our prayers reach your presence. And when we turn to you, do not be indifferent. Adonai, we are arrogant and stubborn, claiming to be blameless and free of sin. But in truth, we have stumbled and strayed. We have done wrong. Please be seated, everyone.
Ashamanu
Our turning away from your mitzvot and laws of goodness is a hollow pursuit. You are just concerning all that happens in our lives. Your way is the way of truth, while our leads to error. What can we say to you whose existence is beyond time and space? What words of ours can reach your realm, beyond the clouds, beyond heaven itself? Every hidden mystery, every revelation, surely you know them all. You know the secrets of the universe and the secrets of the human heart. You know and understand us, for you examine our inner lives. Nothing is concealed from you, nothing hidden from your sight. Eternal One, our God and God of our ancestors, we pray that this be your will. Forgive all our wrongs, pardon us for every act of injustice. Help us atone for all our moral failures. We rise once again for the Vidui Rabbah, the long confession, page 86. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'zadon u'vishgaga, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'dibor peh. The ways we have wronged you deliberately and by mistake, and harm we have caused in your world through the words of our mouths. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'imutz halev, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'tipshut peh. The ways we have wronged you by hardening our hearts, and harm we have caused in your world through careless speech. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chachash u'b'chazav, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'rechilut. The ways we have wronged you through lies and deceit, and harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'flilut, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'zilzul horim u'morim. The ways we have wronged you by judging others unfairly, and harm we have caused in your world through disrespect to parents and teachers. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'vidui peh, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'hona'at re'ah. The ways we have wronged you through insincere apologies, and harm we have caused in your world by mistreating a friend or neighbor. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chozek yad, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'masa u'v'matan. The ways we have wronged you through violence and abuse, and harm we have caused in your world through dishonesty in business. Failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement. Page 88. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'galui u'v'sater, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'frikat ol. The ways we have wronged you openly and secretly, and harm we have caused in your world by losing self-control. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'gilui arayot, the ways we have wronged you through sexual immorality, and harm we have caused in your world through consumption of food and drink. The ways we have wronged you by giving in to our hostile impulses, and harm we have caused in your world through greed and exploitation. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'latzon, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'netiyat garon. The ways we have wronged you through cynicism and scorn, and harm we have caused in your world through arrogant behavior. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'sinat chinam, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'tum'at svatayim. The ways we have wronged you by hating without cause, and harm we have caused in your world through offensive speech. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bilshon hara, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'tzarut ayin. The ways we have wronged you with a slanderous tongue, and harm we have caused in your world through a selfish or petty spirit. judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement. Please be seated, everyone. We continue on page 97. O God, let our pounding on the gates of mercy thunder on high as darkness falls, and with dawn let the joy of renewal arrive. The day holds the urgency of our prayers, confessions of the heart, lamentations of the soul, till evening comes. May our yearnings rise above the shadow of dusk. May the searching of our souls reach you in the morning. All day our praise is before you. May it be acceptable, may it be received, till evening comes. Page 98, Shema Kolenu. Page 100. God of forgiveness, we come before you in need of compassion. At Sinai, you spoke words that guide our lives to this day, but our ancestors lost faith in you, lost hope in their Redeemer. With one voice, they had promised, "We will do and obey," and yet, stiff-necked, they broke their word, adoring an idol of gold. How wondrous your compassion in the face of their rebellion, your forgiveness in that moment of human weakness and doubt. We too have broken promises to you. We too worship the work of our own hands. We too make of gold a god. And we too forsake your word. At Sinai, you revealed 13 attributes of mercy. These aspects of your nature, your very essence, we now recall. Together, Adonai, Adonai, God compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving and true, showing mercy to the 1,000th generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, granting pardon. Page 104. Together in the English, our God and God of our fathers, God of our mothers, do not abandon us, leaving us in shame. Do not dissolve the covenant you made with us. Rather, draw us near to your teaching. Show us your ways and teach us how to live. Let us be open to your love, ready to revere your very being. Cut away the hardness of our hearts so that we may turn to you with all our heart's devotion, truly repentant. For the sake of your great name, pardon our failures, forgive our moral weakness, as in the holy words of your psalmist, Adonai, as befits your name, forgive my sin, no matter how great. Page 106, we join with the cantor, Ki anu amecha.
Ki anu amecha ve'ata Eloheinu, anu amecha ve'ata Avinu, anu avadecha ve'ata Adonenu, anu gehallecha ve'ata Eloheinu, anu nachalatecha ve'ata goraleinu, anu tzomnecha ve'ata roeinu, anu karmecha ve'ata notreinu, anu ve'ulatecha ve'ata yotzreinu, anu rayatecha ve'ata doneinu, anu zegulatecha ve'ata kerobeinu, anu amecha ve'ata malkeinu, anu amirecha ve'ata mamireinu.
We are your people. You are our God. Forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement. We turn ahead to page 112. Again, I invite you all to rise for Avinu Malkeinu, page 112. Avinu Malkeinu, ha'er lanu et derech hayenu. Avinu Malkeinu, illumine for us the path of our life. Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we find the strength to take the road less traveled? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we come to know the purpose of our existence? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we learn not to live life in vain? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we get out of our indifference? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we distinguish between truth and falsehood? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we find the answers to our questions? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we gird ourselves with strength to seek answers? We are on page 114.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha, Avinu Malkeinu, Chol aleinu,
114 at the bottom. Avinu Malkeinu malei yadenu mi berchotecha. Avinu Malkeinu, let our hands overflow with your blessings. Avinu Malkeinu ha'areim keren meshichecha. Avinu Malkeinu, let our eyes behold the dawn of redemption. Avinu Malkeinu na'al tashivenu reikam milfanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, we pray, do not turn us away from you with nothing. Avinu Malkeinu kabel berachamim uveratzon et tefilatenu. Avinu Malkeinu, welcome our prayer with love, accept and embrace it. Avinu Malkeinu, act toward us as befits your name. Avinu Malkeinu, aseh imanu leman shemecha. Avinu Malkeinu, aseh lemancha im lo lemanenu. Avinu Malkeinu, act for your sake, if not for ours. Avinu Malkeinu, ein lanu melech ela ata. Avinu Malkeinu, you alone are our sovereign. Avinu Malkeinu, petaksha arei shamayim litfilatenu. Avinu Malkeinu, let the gates of heaven be open to our prayer. Avinu Malkeinu, shma kolenu, hus verachem aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, let our voice, hear our voice, and treat us with tender compassion. Avinu Malkeinu, chonenu v'anenu, ki ein banu ma'asim, aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love. Please be seated, everyone. It is my pleasure to call upon our video Kol Nidre appeal. Mark Katz, you'll appreciate this feels like a moment out of Monty Python.
Greetings, fellow BHS members, and Good Yom Tov. We are Mark Katz
and Jennifer Zaslow,
and this year's Kol Nidre appeal comes to you directly from our kitchen table. Now, perhaps you may remember me from last year's annual appeal, and this evening I'd like to provide an update. We did it. In the midst of chaos and dislocation, when our synagogue doors were locked and membership and preschool enrollment was dropping, we set an ambitious fundraising goal that was equal to our widening budget deficit and successfully raised $290,000, far more than we've ever raised before. For that, we can be proud of ourselves and grateful to those who contributed above and beyond their membership dues.
And speaking of pride, we just came home from Rosh Hashanah services, and we've never been more proud to be BHS members. The sanctuary at Plymouth was only about a third full, but it was full of ruach, full of spirit. I witnessed elbow bumps and many hugs, and I myself experienced a hug that nearly brought me to tears. The choir that I sing in wore gigantic singer's masks, which you might have noticed, all organized by the wonderful cantor Ayelet. And even though they were quite uncomfortable, I have to say, I've never been more moved to sing in that choir. The messages from our president, Marcia Bellows, and Rabbi Serge were messages of optimism and resilience. And most moving was the shofar blowing by the wonderful Stuart Sachs and his daughter Zoe. If you watched, you know that the rabbi and the cantor did a lot of work to ensure that we complied with CDC guidelines, and so we threw open the doors and had the shofar blown on the front steps of Plymouth Church. It was like a call not only to our congregants, but Jews all over Brooklyn and maybe the world. It was an incredible moment.
It really was. You know, and Rosh Hashanah was the culmination of an amazing year for our synagogue as we watched our synagogue swing into action, shape-shifting to fill all kinds of needs with equal parts compassion and ingenuity, all the while keeping us physically distanced and spiritually connected, as they say. And now, it's time to do it all over again.
Last year's appeal raised $290,000. It was the most successful appeal in the 60-plus year history of BHS. So thank you. Thank you. With that money, we filled the deficit created by lost revenue, and we made it possible for families who were struggling financially to maintain their membership and keep their children in religious school. We also maintained the salaries of the full-time staff who run BHS, from clergy to administrators to teachers to support staff. We also applied for and received a federal PPP loan to help us do just that.
In short, thanks to you and thanks to what we raised a year ago, we made it through the most challenging year BHS has ever known.
This year's appeal is less dire, but no less urgent. It's worth saying that many synagogues saw membership and engagement fall off a cliff in the last year. That is not what happened at BHS. The numbers tell the story. For us, while membership is down, it's moving in the right direction. And for us, preschool and religious school enrollment continue to be down, but are moving in the right direction. And here's something else that tells our story. The scaffolding outside our home at 131 Remsen Street. If you haven't walked by, we really encourage you to do so. Despite the hardships of the last year, our ambitious plans to expand our community's space have continued undaunted. To us, there is no clearer sign of this community's resilience. We are rebounding and rebuilding, slowly but surely, and with your help, we'll continue to do so in the year ahead.
Our goal for this year's Kol Nidre appeal is to raise $200,000 to support the operations of our synagogue. That's less than we raised last year, but more than we need to raise in a typical year, and it's the exact amount we need to fill the gap between the revenue from membership dues and what it costs to run BHS day to day.
Here's some more good news. A number of families have stepped forward with a match to help us reach our goal. They've offered to match every dollar contributed by families who have not participated in the appeal in the last 3 years, up to $1,800.
So if that includes you, that means your contribution of, say, $1,800 would actually equal $3,600. So, to wrap up, let's all of us reunite in full force next year at this time to celebrate, among other things, reaching the goal of this year's Kol Nidre appeal. And it all starts with the pledge that you can make this week.
In the meantime, from our family to yours, a good Yom Tov and an easy fast to us all. Hoshana Tova.
Now, I believe there are pledge cards that were pre-inserted in your machzorim. Take them home and do what you know. I'm a little slow, sorry. We are at page 116, and as you are able in body or spirit to rise again, I invite you to rise for Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו בחוק המונה. ואנחנו קוראים
join together at the top of page 119. May the time not be distant, our God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when lies and bigotry shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. So may all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your dominion be established on earth and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever. If you would please remain standing. Our thoughts turn to loved ones whom death has taken from us, both in recent days and those who died at this season in years past. Our hearts open as well to the wider circles of loss in our community and wherever grief touches the human family. We call to mind those passed in Shloshim, Betty Bronstein, recalled by Larry Weinshell, Stephen Schechter and Nina Taft, recalled by my family, Etta Barkus, recalled by Grace and Bob Vogel, Josh and Scott. And those yard sites we have recorded at this season: Betty Marilyn Bellis, recalled by Wendy Bellis, Frances Shapiro, recalled by Laura Shapiro, Adele Nellis, recalled by Sharon Nellis, Miriam Ezra, recalled by Liz Ezra, Susan Hillsberg Horowitz, recalled by Jennifer Wilkov, Jerome Harmon, recalled by Lynn Harmon, Irving Philip Marks, recalled by the community, Myra L. Brown, founding member, recalled by our community, Leonard Oliner, recalled by Jerome Oliner, Richard Ezra, recalled by Liz Ezra, Gertrude Wolfe, recalled by John Romano, William Laverne McQuillan, recalled by Mike McQuillan, Raphael Kosakoff, recalled by Sharon Kosakoff, Dorothy Lewis, recalled by Marty Minkowitz, David Weiner, recalled by Helene Furman Gold, Dorothy Coleman Tolmack, recalled by Bill Coleman, Leonard Marcus, recalled by Barbara Marcus, Leo Taft, recalled by my family, Frida Rechtman, recalled by Yigal Rechtman, Paulette First, recalled by Mark First, Frida Tell, recalled by Lawrence Smetana, Eugene Schwartz, founding member, recalled by our congregation, James Skinner, recalled by Laura Shapiro, Norman Kalt, recalled by Susan Teich, Phyllis Akers, recalled by Jen Wilkov and Andy Akers, Shelley Fishbein Trauber, recalled by Haley Geffman Gold, Sarah Cohen, recalled by our congregation, Inez Janger, recalled by Ted Janger, Sidney Manet, recalled by Jerry Armine Klein, and Justin Newman, recalled by Joel Nowak. If I've inadvertently mispronounced any of these names, or if I have failed to share aloud the name of a loved one who you are reciting Kaddish for a recent passing or for this season of the year, I invite you, as my hand comes across the congregation, to share those names aloud.
Peter Caucasian, Jack Hopkins.
Zikron Livracha, may their memories be a blessing in this new year and always. We sanctify their names and their memories even as we sanctify God's name and pray for the coming of God's realm. The words of Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish, page 122. We join together as a community, page 122. Yit Gadal, Yit Kadash, Shemei Rabbah, V'alma Divrah Chirutei, V'amlich Malchutei, V'chayechon, V'yomechon, Uv'chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael, V'agalau V'zman Kari V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah, Mevarach Le'olam L'amei Maya. Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitba'ar, V'yitroman, V'yitnasei. V'yitadar, V'yitalev, V'yitalal, Shemei D'kudsha, B'richu. Leila uleila mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata zamiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlamma rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav hu ya'asei shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen.
Osei shalom b'mromav hu ya'asei shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Ya'asei shalom shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol yoshvei tevel.
Ve'imeru.
Amen.
Amen. The briefest of announcements, worship begins tomorrow morning here at Plymouth, 10:30 a.m. sharp. People ask me how long will it run. I have no idea. We'll not go longer than we usually do and maybe a little less. We are starting an hour later than usual, 10:30 a.m. 3 o'clock we are online with the community kids services. And 5 p.m. we'll gather for Mincha, Yisker, and Ne'ilah. I hope that we will finish someplace between 7:15 and 7:30 tomorrow evening, sunset time, and break the fast. There are many other things that could be announced. We will need some help tomorrow night taking Torah scrolls back to the synagogue, especially if it's raining. So please, if you have a strong knees and strong back, guys and gals, please think about whether that's your way that you'd like to participate this year. Those who sow in tears will reap in joy. The words from Psalm 126. You'll find the words at the bottom of page 123. You a peaceful evening. A reminder that our staff and our greeters would very much appreciate if you can help us out by returning the prayer books to the Machzorim with you so they can be piled up for tomorrow morning. A peaceful night, a meaningful fast, and we'll see you tomorrow. Shana Tova. Gemar Tov.